EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. Got a great show planned for everybody today, October 2nd, everybody. Moving right along. That's John McMullen, the #1 Eagles beat reporter in town. Give him a follow at JF McMullen. I'm your host, Zander Krause. Give me a follow at Real Zander. I will have two great guests on today, and Mike Gil and Brandon Lee Gouton, as we always do on Wednesdays. Johnny Mac, how you doing on this Wednesday morning, brother?
I'm doing well. Bye week Wednesday typically would be the big practice day of the week, but the Eagles early bye week, some good, some bad. I still think it's more bad than good. I don't like early bye weeks, but probably because of the circumstance, probably a little bit better than normal for this team.
Definitely with the injuries, obviously, you're talking about key guys, John. You know, it's not we're talking about majorly key players to this football team. So that is the beauty of this bye week, but no doubt about it. They got a 13-game run, John, coming out of the bye. So that's a lot. That's a lot of football on the back end compared to what they have on the front. A couple things I want to talk about here, John. In the open, I know the coordinator spoke yesterday, but I want to go to the Darius Slay stuff because it's all over my social media feed. It's all over everywhere. And we talked about it a little bit yesterday, but we didn't get too in depth with it. I'll ask you just to start your thoughts on that whole saga that's going on right now. Slay put up a video responding to some of the criticism coming from Eagles fans. Your thoughts on that whole situation right now and how it's unfolding. I will say, John, before I don't want to tip the question too much, but it does look like it could be a problem inside the locker room when you have a guy like CJ Gardner-Johnson who gives a crap about all of that stuff. Your thoughts on how that's unfolding?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it, I guess, from the organizational perspective, and if I were the organization, and they do, and they constantly preach to these guys to stay off social media as much as possible. No good is going to come from it, but they're grown men, and they do what they want, and it's a generation I mentioned yesterday that grew up with social media. It's very important to them. And you have these circumstances. I do know, like the coaches would, pull out their hair. In my, my case, I don't have any. From their perspective, they want to correct technique problems, tackling problems. They want to figure out what's up with the slow starts. And Nick's on WIP getting asked about stupid social media bullshit. So it's frustrating from that perspective, but you got to deal with it. And yeah, it's a problem. And the worst part of it is it's a self-inflicted problem, obviously. Yeah. Look, I've been doing this for a long time at a much lower level. I put out a tweet there yesterday. I was talking I got so much shit for it. It's unbelievable. And the mute button goes on overdrive. These guys, it's like times a million. They're getting, if they play poorly, if they or fans perceive them to play poorly, they get a lot of what's on social media. And the first, you want to defend yourself. That's human nature. And it takes a lot of discipline not to defend yourself. But you know what doesn't take a lot of discipline? Don't do it in the first place. Just ignore it. Easier said than done, as I said. I'm sure that's all the Eagles can do is preach it. Ignore it, get away from it, stop it, mute it, block it, do whatever you have to do. But, then you have these guys with podcasts, like Slay has this podcast, and they see the success of Jason Kelce, and they get this engagement, and they get this popularity. And there's a business part of it as well. Their branding, so to speak, is part of it as well. But I do think specifically with Slay and Micah Parsons and the fact that they're friends, that's one of those things that fans just don't like.
Yeah, and I can understand the point of like you got to get over that because Slay's going to be buddy. It's just a new league, but why go there with your teaming? And I'm not even talking about whether C.J. Gardner-Johnson, is in the right or wrong because the dude just does talk a lot. It's easy fodder for Michael Parsons to go on his podcast and rip into C.J. I mean, he's a big target. He makes himself a big target. But doesn't Darius Slay, as a leader of the football team, have to understand where he is with certain players? I get it. Slay likes Micah. I'm not even criticizing them for that, but you're a leader, dude. Now CJ Gardner-Johnson's sharing over on his social account, damn, ... And the cryptic messages.
Well, the cryptic. I don't think Slay is the problem here. I'll put it that way. But from the standpoint of it's ironic because Micah gets crap from Cowboys fans because of his respect for Lane Johnson in the past and him talking up Lane Johnson, how good Lane Johnson is. And he gets the same thing from his side. So from the standpoint, as Slay has said, he knew Micah before he even got to the Cowboys. They work out together. Their families know each other. I mean, this is like, that part you got to get over if you're a fan that they're friends. And if Micah plays with the Eagles, they'll get over it real quickly. That's probably not going to happen.
Yeah, I just thought it was low for him to talk about, especially a guy who has a side business on social media and who, obviously has a history with the city in the past in terms of going at them on social media. The dude cares. These modern, John, we talk about modern players all the time. We talk about it with the coach.
Yeah, but what did he say that was bad about CJ?
I don't think Slay said anything wrong. He's right. If CJ Gardner-Johnson's going to talk shit, eventually you're going to have to back it up.
That's all he said.
I know. But
that's all he said.
Read the room.
It's become a cliche, but it's the truest cliche in the history of the world is control what you can control. And these players hear it a million times plus one over the NFL, over the course of the NFL year. It's good advice for people in their everyday lives as well. Like he was asked a question, he answered the question, and he didn't say anything badly. And the perception is because of one word and ... it's a problem.
It's bad optics
because
too,
because
sitting there laughing,
because of the other guy. Like you can't control if he takes that as disrespectful. I think if you got 100 people, and don't get me wrong, there's a bunch of Eagles fans that see it as disrespectful as well. But if you take 100 people that don't have skin in the fight, hey, is this disrespectful? The vast majority that don't have mental health problems is going to say no. It's not disrespectful. So you can't control how other people take things. However, you can control not saying anything.
Right. And that's where I am.
And if I were Slay, I wouldn't go on Micah's podcast and vice versa during the season, off season, have at it. I mean, to me, that's just common sense. But I grew up in a different era when there were real rivalries. I always talk about, there are no real rivalries anymore.
Yeah, you heard Shady McCoy talking about it yesterday a little bit.
Yeah, the Sixers and Celtics wanted to kill each other back in the day. And I bring it up all the time. Julius Erving strangling Larry Bird after a fight. They legit had legit angst. Even, a generation ago, the Ray Lewis generation, the Steelers and the Ravens were the best rivalry. And some people still think it is. And it probably still is if you're rating rivalries. But there's not that amongst the fan bases, it's the same. And I think there's a disconnect there. And, they want their guys to hate their guys, so to speak. It's just not that way anymore.
But that doesn't answer to why he would be. And I get what you're saying. I know they're going to be friends. It's the modern era. But the optics of it are brutal. And Slay, as a captain and an older player, should understand that. He's from the outsider view. Forget what.
Well, he's the same.
He's laughing
what is the difference?
Johnson's name gets brought up on an opposing player's podcast. The optics of that for CJ Gardner is not good. He feels disrespected, which is why many people are saying he's disrespected, because the optics of it are brutal. Now, I get it. Perception's not always reality, but in social media world, it is. And I think that's where Slay's going to
I mean, I find it ironic that people don't go to the never go to the root of the problem. Never go to the root of the problem. Like, why is the guy talking so much shit who's not playing that well? Not that Slay's playing great, but he's playing a heck of a lot better than to somebody who feels like he was disrespected that wasn't disrespected. So, I mean, if you bring it, to me, he's telling the truth. If you bring it the way CJ brings it from a vocal standpoint, and you don't back it up, and you're getting all hurt about people clapping back,
I get it.
I mean, why don't you shut it down?
Yeah, but it's an optics mess for Slay to be laughing about a teammate after getting blown out. Remember, he also tweeted out the career stats, which, you know, people had a problem with that as well. It's like you're piling on.
Has anybody? Well, he said the career stats thing is just human nature. He's got in himself. He admitted that fans got to him, and that's why I say to him, and I will say to him, because he will listen to you. You know, hey, you know, you probably shouldn't do that. You should. You not that he's looking for any advice, and he's going to do what he wants to do. The other guy's not going to have a conversation, not going to have an engagement, not going to have any of that. So, look, there's a good guy here. And it's the good guy that everybody thinks is the bad guy, who's trying to uplift people. And I say it all the time. I tell the Devin Allen story all the time. You know, when he first got here as a track star, trying to go back to football, didn't know anybody, just happened to be in the off season running in the Penn relays because he was still doing the track stuff as well. And Slay gets his teammates together to go support his new teammate that he barely knows. That's the guy he is. That's why, and people with the C and all this stuff, his teammates voted him a captain. His teammates voted him a captain. Not Nick Sirianni, not the coaching staff, not the coaching staff. And if they want to pull the C from his chest, like you all want to pull the C from the chest, they will. But they won't, because they love the guy. So that to me is overall. That to me is a non-question. But again, when you should be talking about, hey, they missed 15 stinking tackles. Hey, they you know, what's going on with
John? You do that right after you do that. This is what the optics are about your teammate after your defense stinks on ice. That's part of it as well. I think that fans are upset with. And I think
fans are upset. Let's be honest.
I think the bigger issue, John, is this might be somewhat of a fracture in the locker room.
Let's be honest. Right? Well, let's be honest. Fans are upset because they lost. If the exact same circumstance happened and they won, they wouldn't give a shit. So that's the only reason they're upset. Now, if Slay played poorly in a win and he clapped back, that, you know, you'd see a little bit and that'd be it.
Yeah.
And nobody would give two shits. So I'm not buying that anybody's upset about this and this is granted and this is going. And if there's a fracture in the locker room, we all know where that fracture's coming from. And it ain't Darius Slay.
Fair enough. Do you think it was wrong?
And by the way, Howie Roseman deserves the criticism for reintroducing something to the locker room. He's the one who deserves the criticism. And you should have paid Xavier McKinney $8 million more if you had to.
Yeah, well, I would agree with the assessment that CJ Gardner-Johnson hasn't been a good football player for us this year. But do you agree that it was a poor judgment in that moment from Slay, optic wise?
Oh, yeah. The minute he steps in front of the podcast microphone, it's a poor judgment. But he wants to have his own brand. He wants to get his own message out. And this is part good and part bad.
Yeah.
Look, people run a million different directions. I said I got a much smaller range of people than Slay, and they just say shit that I don't say, and they say like it's a fact. And you either clap back like Slay did, or you ignore it and move on to the next one. It's a bad. I would encourage any athlete to stop it while they're playing, but that, again, there's a business side to it.
Right.
If you're just worried about the pure football aspect, stop it. But they're not. They're worried about other things. They're worried about the business aspect. And I get that. And that's why you can't go and say, stop it, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. And you can't ban them from doing
because
it.
They're setting themselves up for life after football and all these things. But I do think that's my only issue, is that I think Slay, as a leader of the football team, needs to read that room better. Whether it's on CJ Gardner-Johnson or not is beside the point.
Well, he shouldn't be on Micah's podcast in the season.
Go against your player. He knows that kind of guy CJ Gardner-Johnson is. Now, I'm not saying Slay is the problem. I'm saying he created an issue that could have easily been avoided as a captain.
An unforced error. But, if somebody's got a way to stop all these players, not just the Eagles, all these players from getting on social media or playing video games or getting on Twitch and talking what they want to do, but by all means, contact the office, because they'd love to hear it.
Right.
Other than shutting down free speech, which, hey, maybe people wanted to, judging by what's going on in this country. Other than that, and saying, all right, put it in your contract, you can't do this stuff. I don't know how you stop it. But yeah, every single one of them. And it's happened multiple times, whether it's A.J. Brown clapping back against these morons, whether it's Kenny Gainwell from the locker room clapping back, whether it's Slay, whether it's CJ, on and on and on and on. It happens again and again and again and again. And it's going to happen again and again and again and again, because people get attacked, and their first human nature response to that is to clap back. And then you have this issue, well, you shouldn't do that. How about focusing on the trolls that attack players? How about focusing on those losers? How about focusing on the 57 idiots who treat, every time somebody's injured, they say, oh, he's made of glass. How about those morons?
Yeah, but they don't have it. They don't fracture the locker room like Slay has the ability to.
I get what you're saying. They fracture the locker room with their actions. I'm saying, if you have a solution to stopping players from using social media, I'm all ears.
Oh no, there's no solution to that. Which is why I think, as a leader,
the Eagles would be all ears, other than be Jalen Hurts and ignore it and don't do it. And people don't like Jalen. Some people don't like Jalen's because he's too close to the vest, because he's not engaging, and because he's not, you can't win, Zander. You can't win. I mean, how much crap does Jalen Hurts get for being the way he is? When he loses, when they're losing, when he wins, oh, he's stoic, he's unflappable, he's so even keeled. It's a great thing. When they lose, what the hell? The guy shows no emotion. You can't win. You can't win. And that's why Nick Sirianni bended it all off. Devin White, I should have added Devin White with Levante David. And Nick bended it all off, because you can't win. Other than preaching your players, which the Eagles do, I know that for a fact, stay away from it. But they don't.
Yeah, they don't. My only point would be, Slay's got to read the room, man. As a cat, I get what you're saying, but Slay's got to read the room, man. CJ Gardner, I mean, your defense is struggling. CJ Gardner-Johnson is an emotional guy, cares a lot about that stuff. You got to read the room better there. So that would be my one pushback. Real quick, John, let's read the super chat. Chip 2, thank you, brother. Let's go to the super chat real quick before we get to Mike Gil coming up 3 minutes here on Birds. He says, J-Mac, I watched the All-22, and yes, the scheme has guys rotating late for the sake of disguise, but we are, in fact, playing some man coverage, and guys are just blowing coverages, missing tackles. Coach can't tackle for you. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, yeah, I've been saying that for years. Now, even again, subjective. Most of what the Eagles do is zone with man principles. So a lot of times it'll look like man, but it's really zone. But that that's where you get the 88%. Basically, they're in some type of and Vic explained that to a little extent in that it's basically man principles in the zone that you have, which is very complicated and is susceptible to creating blown coverages, which you've seen over the years with this defense. But beyond that, yeah, I mean, the tackling was a big issue. 15 tackles. So one had 12, one had 11, one had 16. The Eagles in-house, 15 missed tackles. And that's the only number that matters, their in-house number. And Vic confirmed it as 15. You're going to lose if you lose 15 tackles on a given game day. You're going to lose. So that's got to improve. And the ironic thing is they're not even close to being the worst tackling team in the NFL, which surprised me.
So did you buy then you bought the excuse, not the excuse, but you bought his explanation as the tackles.
No, I'm the one who asked him the question. He didn't use it as an excuse.
Well, just because I remember you saying yesterday you thought that's the route he was going to go.
Yeah. And he said, I'll pull it up real quick. I don't want to misquote him, but I'm the one who asked him the question, and he said, he basically I didn't know if he was understanding because he's giving me that quizzical Big Fangio look sometimes, and I'm basically said I didn't know if it was getting through, but it was getting through, and basically. And I'm looking for it. Can't find it, of course. Anyway, let me search for it. But while I do that,
if you want, we'll get to Mike Gil.
Yeah, well, I'll look for it and I'll try to bring it up when Mike is here. But yeah, he basically did not. He said, yeah, that's a big part of it, but. That said, the coverage wasn't good enough. So it wasn't like he just immediately defaulted to it.
Right.
Which is what was using that as an excuse. He said that the coverage wasn't good. And I did find it. So he says, yeah, I follow you I didn't get it if he was getting the question. The answer is yes, to a degree. A lot of the bigger gains came after missed tackles. So that would have been a major plus for us if we could have tackled better. But still, we've got to be tighter in coverage too. So he wasn't using it as an excuse, but I do think it's much better. I mean, people aren't having as much problems with the coverage if those underneath throws and you're making the tackle right away. There's still completions. And as we know with the Jonathan Gannon era, people are still going to complain. But if you tackle, it's going to look a hell of a lot better than if you don't tackle.
Right. No doubt about that. Let's get to our commercial break. Chip Tooth, appreciate the super chat, man. Thank you for checking in. A great viewer. I know you're always in here. So thank you, brother, for the support of the channel. Let's get to our commercial break. I see my man Mike Gil in the green room. We'll talk to Mike Gil coming up next on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on Sports Grid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on Sports Grid.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer 3 major services, the first one being basement waterproofing. The second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs. And then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Heading down the shore, have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood day.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365 here, joined by Mike Gil now from 97.3 ESPN down the shore. Mike, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Wednesday morning?
Doing all right. Nice little bye week. No problems, right?
Yeah, no problems. And all the problems are problems that have nothing to do with the football field, it seems like, Mike, typically. So we'll start with the social media stuff because that's where we started, even though I don't want to talk about it. But, boy, I mean, has Mike Gil got a solution? I mean, these guys keep shooting themselves in the foot by going on, but how do you stop them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have an answer. No, I don't have a solution outside of you just saying, I think you said beforehand, you just basically say you're not allowed to. You put it in your contract. And we have situations now where the head coach of the Raiders liked a post that said, you know, Devontae Adams or something to that. When you have the coach now getting involved in these things. Before, we're talking about the players doing asinine things. This is the coach of the team liking something. I've always been like, okay, listen, you know, the Bryce Huff stuff, he scrubbed his whole thing. Like, you really going to take time out of your day to remove? I don't even know how to do that.
I don't know how to do that.
Right? Yeah, I don't even know how to do that. Like, if I wanted to remove every comment, like, I don't even know how to do that. So for these guys to take the time out of your day, what are your priorities, Bryce Huff? And maybe the answer as to why you don't have a freaking sack, tackle, pressure, hurry is that you know more about erasing and scrubbing your social media page than you do the defense that you're involved in right now. Now, maybe they're using him the wrong way, and maybe they're not. But if you are more interested in erasing and scrubbing your social media, then your priorities are out of line. Now, Darius Slay is a guy who has a lot of respect in that locker room. But I kind of look at it like in the middle of the season to be going on another show with a different team and talking about your own team. Yeah, your own teammate. It's kind of like, are you serious? Like, read the room, man. You didn't have a good game. And then you posted your stats out there. Okay, great. You once were great. Well, right now, in this moment, not so great. So read the room and say, you know what? I've had a great career, but I did not play well, and we are not playing well. I'm going to have to pass, Micah Parsons. Sorry.
Yeah, I thought it was a blatant lack of reading the room, just like you just said. I mean, look, the bottom line is the cat's out of the bag on social media. Like, I get what you guys are saying, but we're not going backwards. If anything, Mike, there's more coaches coming up that are going to be liking and sharing and deleting and all sorts of stuff.
Now, I am firing my coach if he's on social media.
I would too, but if that's why if you're a leader,
the coach one is. That's that's big. When I saw that, that's like, are you kidding me, Antonio Pierce?
To the point about Slay, he's got a C on his chest. You got to read the room. Talking about CJ Gardner, he cares. CJ Gardner-Johnson cares about social media. That's the reality of the world we live in as a leader and as a captain.
By the way, you got
to read that room better and
shouldn't,
avoid
you
that.
shouldn't care about social media.
Listen,
he does though,
Yes,
and
he
that, like I
does.
said, that cat's out of the bag.
From August to hopefully February, your social media should be used for promoting your charities. Maybe if I'm the player of the week, something to that extent. Have somebody else running it for you. If you want to have a little off time from March, April, May, June, July to carry on shows, create a podcast, do a Twitch channel, show everybody that you can play a freaking video game. All right, great. But in season, have enough audacity to understand that people don't want to see these kind of things, and especially when you're not playing well. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, by the way, when he got signed, people were excited. People were like, okay, they made a move to bring in a guy that led the league in interception was here. This team struggled to create turnovers last year. This is a guy that can bring that in. He brings some personality to this team. And if your personality is now known more for your reaction on social media than it is on the field, say for one play that he made so far this year, that's a problem. And everything is manifesting, as this bye week gets here into they got problems here, there's problems there, there's problems there, there's problems here. You're in the 4th week of the season, and you've already got all these questions. And this league is too competitive. Everybody is right here. All it takes is one tiny little thing to move you from here to here. And if you're here and the other teams go here and that little problem takes you here, that's enough. And they have enough things going on right now that you're going to start sliding from the middle to the lower echelon real fast if you don't figure these things out. And the biggest one on top of the social media is the coach and the quarterback.
Yeah, well, I don't think the social media thing is a big problem in the sense of the football perspective of it, and that I think is the frustrating part for the coaches is that we missed 15 tackles. We got to fix this shit, and I think WIP had asked Nick Sirianni about Devin White and Levante David. He's out there, congratulating his buddy for making a play. And essentially what Nick said was, I got bigger things to worry about. And then this guy doesn't even play. Now, he didn't phrase it like that, but you could tell that was a sentiment. It's like, I got bigger. I'm trying to fix things on the field than worry about this nonsense. But this nonsense becomes a thing. That's all we're talking about. And it really is nonsense.
It's not necessary. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a distraction.
It's self-inflicted. It's self-inflicted. That's the frustrating part, no doubt, from the coaches and the organization.
Hey, listen, I mean, this is at the biggest level. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is on the McAfee show, which
every
realistically
week during the season,
which started out as a show like this. It was a YouTube show, and he was on the YouTube show every week. And then, of course, ESPN paid McAfee to bring the show over there. But you got Aaron Rodgers, maybe the biggest star that's left in the league, outside of maybe Mahomes. I guess Mahomes probably has passed him, but he might be the second most recognizable name in your game. And he's on there weekly,
and constantly getting in trouble for stuff he does
exactly.
on there.
So this but these are all distractions that mediocre teams don't need to pull themselves out of mediocrity.
Very good. Very, very true.
Yeah. But it's not, and again, Micah has gotten in trouble in the past for speaking well about Lane Johnson from Cowboys. So it's not like it's unique to the Eagles. This is a modern NFL problem.
No doubt.
And if I had a solution, I would, but I would give it, but I don't have one to stop these guys from doing it. It's ingrained. It's ingrained to them. It's important to them. As Zander said, it's very important to them.
Well, when you are a player in the league right now, and you see Travis Kelce and his brother getting how much for their podcast?
Yeah. Well,
how much? What did they get? $250 million? Or was it $25
million deal? They got
$100 million deal. You are saying, I want that deal, and it almost becomes I can get paid more for doing things outside of my job than I can doing my job. And if all it takes is me going on there and being funny and talking and getting other of my friends to come on and talk, I can get that bag by doing that. And that becomes more appealing. So you're giving these guys, and Travis Kelce's an active player. And Jason was too when he started that thing. And it's like, it's okay for those guys to do it. Why can't I? I got plenty of buddies that want to come on my podcast, and we can just chop it up, and maybe I'll get paid too.
Yeah, not only were they doing it, Mike, the Eagles were promoting it. The NFL was promoting it. The whole billion-dollar entities were behind it.
The key to the Kelce's is they don't tend to get themselves into trouble.
It's true. And their brothers, it's a little bit of a different dynamic than Slay going on with Micah and clowning your teammate when you have a fucking awful defense and you can't stop a nosebleed. That's a bad look.
Yeah,
that's a bad look.
The point of the Kelce thing is more pop culture-y. They kind of are self-deprecating about their own performances and yada, yada. Whereas I feel like everybody is trying to do something to kind of stick out and stand out to get that attention so I can get recognized, so I can get that money. So I'm going to go get my buddy that plays on a different team, and maybe we can say something that will – and I don't know that that's subconsciously what they're trying to do. Like Micah Parsons, hey, let me go get to the fans, an Eagle and a Cowboy. Trey Thomas tweeted this out yesterday. I can never imagine Lito, Sheldon, Troy Vincent, Bobby Taylor going on DeMarcus Ware's podcast and talking about how shitty of a game Brian Dawkins.
Well, in all due respect, there was no such thing.
I get that. I get that. But my point is, for the fans, the perception is an Eagle and a Cowboy could never talk, and those days are over. Those days are over.
Those days are over.
The kayfabe, if you will, for the fans is those two should not be matriculating during the course of the season, and they are openly coming out.
It is. I'm glad you brought that up because there is a pro wrestling feel to it, in the fact that people are now let in on the secrets. And you bring up kayfabe, for those who don't know, that means keep the act up in public, so you don't let the fans in on it. There is a lot of kayfabe here. Like, guys used to be friends in the past. It just wasn't as in your face.
Yeah.
And the rivalries were, more, legitimate. But even back then, there were a bunch of guys who were just friends.
Look at the Mets Braves game the other day. They're playing a doubleheader, and people wanted the Mets to knock the Braves out because they hate each other. Not only did they not knock them out, after the game was over, the two teams came out in the field and partied together. I mean, these days are over, man.
Yeah.
So, right. It's like the rivalry aspect of it is a fan, which should live on, by the way. Like
it's fan-driven. It's fan-driven.
Right. You need these fan-driven rivalries where the fans hate the Cowboys so much. But sadly, the players don't have that same feel about the Cowboys as the fans do. I've always been more partial to Eagles Giants. I feel like that one should have always have been the higher up. I feel like we give the Cowboys, who haven't been relevant in my 30 years, we give them too much. Well,
it's the old kindling is not a rivalry to fire. I mean, the Eagles have dominated the Giants. The Giants have been so bad for so long. I think,
but that's the fun part about it. That's the fun part about it, is when the one rival just constantly kicks the crap out of the other one.
Yeah,
and
the Parcells days, it was legit. It was a legit rivalry when the Giants were good. And even for some Tom Coughlin as well. But
Micah Parsons is another, one. He's out there every week, and it seems like all he's doing is complaining about everything other than the fact that his team and performances aren't good enough.
Said he got in trouble from Cowboy fans for saying how good Lane Johnson was. I mean, it's not just the Eagles, but yeah. Let's get off this because it's not going anywhere. It's not.
Go to the root of the problem. The defense sucked on Sunday, Mike. Yeah. What's your
defense?
Take?
Yeah.
Before we get to that, I want to get, because you brought up Hurts and Nick Sirianni. Now there's this, because of, what was it, 3 or 4 words about messaging.
Yeah.
And Jalen
we have our moments.
Yeah. So 4 words. We have our moments. And those 4 words, Mike Gil, indicate the giant disconnect again between the head coach and the quarterback.
Yeah, I've been pretty steadfast on my show here that I have to believe that the front office, the ownership group, talked to both of them either together or separately individually and asked each other, Nick, you and Jalen have problems. Can you guys coexist? Can you get along? And if Nick says, love Jalen, he's my guy. Okay, fine. You don't want to get fired. Let me go ask Jalen. Jalen, do you have a problem playing for Nick Sirianni? Because we have to make some decisions this offseason. And if you have a problem with him, you got to let us know now. No, Nick's my guy. All right, let's move on. If that discussion was not had, then you got bigger problems. And the answers that we're getting and the body language that we're getting is suggesting that maybe that conversation was not had, or like many things have evolved and changed to where the quarterback is now to the point where he is not trusting in the direction of where this offense was supposed to be and where it's gotten. Now, some of that could be injury driven. I don't have the guys that I thought I was going to have, and that is frustrating. I can understand that. Man, this is frustrating. I'm throwing the ball to Paris Campbell, who doesn't belong on an NFL field at this stage of his career. Okay, that's frustrating. So are we at the point where he's just frustrated by the injuries? Or are we at the point that he's frustrated by the offense? I don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah. Well, and that ends up that's another question. Like, you have a whole group of people, and this is not, it was very predictable, but I go back to the front office again, and this is more Jeffrey Lurie than Howie Roseman. Boy, this is a bad setup, Mike. This is a bad setup. It was obvious to me it was a bad setup from day one. And now you have, when things go well, Kellen Moore's running the offense. When things go poorly, Nick Sirianni's running the offense. People are going down that route.
Nick didn't help himself by saying.
Yeah, he opened that. That was a mistake. I said it the moment he said it. I said it. That, dude, don't bring that up. Because then you got to get into the context of game planning, and Jeff Stoutland's involved, and Jason Michael's involved, and Aaron Moorhead's involved, and people don't understand that.
I'm going to do something that has never happened in the history of the Jeff Stoutland era, I don't think. But Stoutland has to evolve a little bit here and put his best guys out there. The hell with this, I don't want to move multiple guys. Get the best 5 guys on the field. If you got a guy who's getting his ass kicked out there all day, now I get it. Another guy got hurt, so they had to move Dickerson. But
they did move, which was weird, by the way. But still haven't gotten an answer as to
right. So Becton at right tackle this week, Steen at right guard. We're going to put our best 5 guys out there. You got Fred Johnson, who was a nice story. He got his name mentioned 37 times by Sirianni the day after, and it was a great story. But guess what? He got his ass kicked out there the other day, and that's not fair to this offense. Put your best 5 guys out on the field, not this, well, I don't want to move 2 guys. The guy's a right tackle. He can handle moving for a week if he has to. These are professionals. This whole we don't want to move guys thing is antiquated. Let's move past this and get the best 5 guys on the field to give my team the best shot to perform. They gave themselves no chance to perform because they got sacked 6 times. Johnson had 13 pressures. I mean, that's comparable to the night that who was the guy who played? Was that who played left?
King Dunlop? You going King Dunlop on me?
You had a turnstile at right tackle the other day, and you can't have that. So when you are down guys like they are skill position wise, I got to give my offensive line the best 5 guys out there. And I'm sorry, Mekhi Becton can handle playing right tackle for one night if you needed him to.
Fair point, Mike. I want to ask you, because I know you have a good show, and you also have a interaction with your listening audience. I've noticed a little bit of a change in the tune of many when it comes to the quarterback Jalen Hurts. How do you feel about Jalen Hurts now? 2-2 into the bye, he's second in the league in turnovers. I don't want to beat him up too much. He's missing AJ, Devontae, and Lane last week, but I've noticed that many of the fans are losing patience on Jalen Hurts. I'd be curious to know if you think your listeners are as well. And your thoughts on the quarterback through 4 weeks of this season?
Oh yeah, I definitely think that people are starting to say maybe, and I said this from the get-go. You know, I don't know if I said it on your guys' show, but they were in a terrible spot with him. They had to pay him based on his best and didn't have to factor in his worst. You know, he played a year before that, and that didn't get factored into the contract because his most recent thing was the best. Well, they had to make a decision. They couldn't let him go into the season under the contract he was in. And it was, hey, he just took us to the Super Bowl. So now we have to pay him based on that 1 year. That never works out. You can't say this is the absolute. And I think he gets that money. And like all these guys, when you get paid, the scrutiny gets higher. And he is not on that level. He is not on the level. I remember, John, it might have been 2 years ago we were doing this show, whatever it was. And you said, well, if he gets this, he's going to get $25 million a year. And I said, $25 million a year for Jalen Hurts. And you said that's the going rate for a quarterback right now. Well, he didn't get 25. He got significantly more than that. And listen, he is not that guy. Never was he this guy. What makes him this guy, and you have to give him credit for this, is that he can play with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. But when those guys aren't there, who are you? What are you? Matt LaFleur, these guys are playing with half a deck sometimes, and the team is competent and competitive. The Rams, they're playing without Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp. Now they're 1-3, but they went to San Francisco, played San Francisco and won a game. You've got to be able to find ways when you're missing. Now, listen, I'm not going to say, if you told me at the beginning of the year, hey, the Eagles offense this year is Paris Campbell, Jahan Dotson, Fred Johnson, Johnny Wilson, then my answer is this team's not going to be very good. But for a couple of weeks, I've got to find ways. And the guy who is the constant right now is the quarterback, and they are not good enough. Now, that's not all his fault, but the criticism is you have a guy who's a good player, not a great player. This is the Andre Iguodala thing. When you get that contract, you're supposed to be great, and a lot of times you're just good. And sadly, that comes with signing that deal, which, listen, all these teams are in this problem where they have to make this decision, and there's no other place to go.
Trevor Lawrence.
Everybody. Daniel Jones. None of these quarterbacks are worth what they're getting paid, but the teams are backed into a corner, and the Eagles were backed into the ultimate corner. This guy just took us to the Super Bowl, and he was really the best player on the field in that Super Bowl, and he was second in the MVP voting. What are we supposed to do? But I think in that room, they would say, he is not worth this deal. Look at the guy he was in 2022, and look at the guy he was in 2023. Somewhere along the line, he's going to come back to the middle. He might not be 2022, but he's certainly not 2023. He's somewhere in between, and that's okay. But that contract puts the bullseye on you that you need to be 2023 or better, and he's not.
Boy, I think the thing that complicates it is what you started that. And by the way, I agree with you. But what you started with, I think if people get the contracts complicate things so much, and the fact that it's the cost of doing business at that particular position. When the Eagles signed Jalen Hurts for a very short period of time, I think about 2 weeks, maybe less than 2 weeks, he was the highest paid player in the history of football. Now he's behind Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, Jared Goff, Tua, Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott. And guess what? When the other guys start coming up, he'll be behind them. Patrick Mahomes is behind Jalen Hurts and all those guys. It was his turn. So if I say, where's Jalen Hurts in the top quarterbacks in the NFL, I'm going to say in a good year, he's probably, 9, 8, 9. In a bad year, 11, 12. Right now, he's the 9th best contract. He gets paid what he should get paid. But that complicates because it's so much money. That's just the cost of doing business at that position.
The cost of doing business is absolutely. But here's
but
the
even
thing.
contract out of it, you need to have a quarterback in the league in the NFL that elevates you. Because John, you talk about it all the time. The war of attrition is a bigger part of winning in this league as anything.
Oh,
so if you don't have a quarterback that can elevate when everything is not perfect, that's going to be in the bullseye, and it's going to limit how much your team can do.
And it's way early.
You get you seasons like 22 a lot, where the starting 22 on game one is the same as it is in the Super Bowl. That's not going to happen often.
Here's the question people need to ask themselves. Would you rather have Jared Goff with everything the Eagles have? Would you rather have?
It's hard at this point to say no to that.
Yeah, Jared Goff.
I mean, Jared Goff.
I'm going to make it harder because it's a short sample size.
Jared Goff gets ridiculed because he was the number one pick, and then Wentz got off to a great start, and then Wentz kind of was like, "Oh, the better." Goff has just kind of persevered through a career of having the stigma of being the number one pick and not being a.
And he's already been to Super Bowls, by the way, Super Bowl, and NFC championship games. So
he has taken a down-rotten franchise and made them believable. You believe that the Lions can win a Super Bowl now, and you can only believe a team can win the Super Bowl if you believe in the quarterback. You don't think a team can win ultimately in the end, you'll say, the quarterback's not good. I like the team, but I don't like the quarterback. He has made people believe in that team. So I think Goff has kind of pushed through the thoughts of being a failure as a number one pick or not.
Yeah.
What you
well, no, I mean, he just came off the perfect, he's 18 for 18. The ball didn't hit the ground. So maybe he's not the best example, but somebody who hasn't had the playoff success, Justin Herbert.
I'll tell you what, I'm watching games all weekend, and I asked myself watching Monday Night Football, and I went to West Virginia, so maybe there's bias. I'm watching Geno Smith sling it all over the place. And I'm thinking
one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL.
Well, and listen, and Geno was another guy. He was supposed to be the number one pick. He slides to the second round. He starts with the Jets. He fails there. He bounces all over the place. You're telling me you watched that guy on Monday night and didn't think, man, this guy's better than who we have? You didn't think that watching him play Monday night?
Well, anybody watching the guy I've been focused on is Sam Darnold because of the start.
Sam Darnold's another one. And let me tell you, I had Colin Thompson does my show every Tuesday who played with Sam.
Yeah, he
swore up and down, this kid can play. He just needs to be in the right spot. He's with the Jets, a disaster. He said he did not get the right coaching in Carolina, and he was a disaster. He went to San Francisco and did what I recommend all these quarterbacks. Now, some are outliers.
That's why I was on Sam Darnold.
And learned. But this is where the coach and the quarterback and the coaching you get from that guy matters. And Darnold has the skill set. He has the ability. He was the number 2 pick in the draft for a reason. And now you're seeing, I said the other day, Minnesota's undefeated. If you don't believe in that team, what is it about that team you don't believe in? Because they've got plenty of weapons. They've finally got a half-competent offensive line. Their defense is pretty good. I'm not saying it's great, but it's pretty good. The only thing you would say is, I don't know if I believe in the quarterback. But if you think Sam Darnold can play, that team's for real then, because they got everything else they need.
It's a small sample size. I think he can play, but he might show up in London. They got the London game this week, and he might, you're waiting for the other shoe because you've seen it in bad situations. To Mike's point, though, this is a good situation. He's got Justin Jefferson. He's got Jordan Addison. Absolutely. And by the way, T.J. Hawkinson's coming. He doesn't even have T.J. Hawkinson.
And he's got a good staff around him. That's
he's got Kevin O'Connell.
These guys walk into a situation where they don't have great people around them. Caleb Williams walking into Chicago.
No, that's
not a great offensive situation for him. And you're seeing him, kind of struggle a little bit. That doesn't mean he can't be great or isn't great, but you've got a defensive-minded head coach there, and you've got him in a system that's probably not maximizing what he is. Jaden Daniels, hey, Cliff Kingsbury, you're an offensive mind. You take this kid and run with your offense. And this guy's flourishing. A lot of this is how many, you look back over the years, if Tim Couch went to Philly with Andy Reid instead of going to Cleveland and Donovan McNabb, what happens to Tim Couch? Maybe he's got his number. Maybe he's number 5 that will always love you. Who knows?
No, I'm with you. The situation has a lot to do with it with quarterbacks. At Mike Gil Show, make sure you
I was
follow.
a big Donovan fan, so I didn't want Donovan to. I love
that
Donovan.
worked out well for the Eagles. The Eagles made the right decision on the.
Well,
X
they didn't
platform.
have a decision. The decision on couch was made for them.
Well, no, but Ricky Williams at the time, people were hyper.
Yes,
obviously.
little known fact about me: I was the intern at WIP that had to call the Dirty 30.
Oh
members.
my God! I apologies. All right, that's a lot. That's like admitting youthful things that happen to you. And you've overcome it. You've overcome it.
Yeah, that was my job as the intern. Here are 30 people that won an opportunity to go to the draft. Can you please call them and make sure they're at the bus at this time Saturday? It was like a Saturday back then, I think.
Yeah.
So Friday afternoon, I'm in the promotions office. Hey, this is Mike Gil from WIP.
Flashbacks and
congratulations, you're one of the you're one of the Dirty 30, and they weren't called the Dirty 30, but you're one of the 30 people that have been selected to go on this draft bus.
It's amazing, so many, and they've lasted for so long after making one of the worst decisions in the history of mankind. Nobody put 2 and 2 together.
Well, to circle to the Jalen Hurts stuff, Zander, in this town, we talk about it a lot. We prefer personality over performance. Buddy Ryan is great, and Andy Reid sucks. Right? That's the way the fans think in this town. And Jalen Hurts' personality is not one that you're like, I love this guy. He is not the kind of guy that is.
Well, everybody loved him when he won, Mike.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there was still like this feeling of like.
And by the way, because people say I criticize the fans too much. By the way, the vast majority of fans in Philadelphia know that Andy Reid is a better coach than Buddy Ryan. The vocal ones, the most vocal ones are the ones we hear from, Mike.
I know,
and they're the ones who, they're emotional, and that's why they do it. The average fan isn't engaging because they're not insane. I'm not saying everybody that engages is insane, but what I'm saying is, Andy Reid's going at first ballot Hall of Famer. The vast majority of people understand that Andy Reid is a better coach than Buddy Ryan.
Well, yeah, listen, and I bring this up on my show. We criticized Nick Sirianni. I think he deserves some of it, but ultimately, I don't think we take into account the guy got a team to the playoffs that had no business being in the playoffs his first year. He took a team to the Super Bowl. He then had a 10-1 team. There's some good that Sirianni has as a coach. What is that? But at the same time, you have to take it with a grain of salt. The criticism sometimes is that this fan base wanted Andy Reid fired because they thought he stunk. They thought he wasn't good enough to be the coach of this team.
Well, the coaching part of it is they put way too much emphasis on the coaching. Like, and you're setting yourself up for disappointment when you think you've worked it up in your head that Kellen Moore's going to scheme open Paris Campbell and Johnny Wilson and receivers like that. It doesn't work like that. It's the players. It's the players first. And I preach it all the time on this show, but default to the coaching staff. Well, why can't you scheme Paris Campbell open?
Well, the same can be said to John for the defensive side,
Well, I will say, Zander, somebody asked, I think it was a super chat earlier, that, when you have 15 missed tackles, were you schemed properly? You were in position to make the tackle. You didn't make the tackle. So, and if you ask, like yesterday, I said to Colin Thompson, you're an offensive player, Colin. He played tight end. What's a missed tackle the result of? And he said, they're tired. That's why you miss a tackle. You're tired. You're worn out. And, he said, look, you can't.
It's 110 on the field.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about fundamentals. These guys are professional football players. They know how to fucking tackle.
Well, listen, Zander, we think that because we were taught how to tackle. You go watch a junior football league practice. They can't tackle. They're not allowed to tackle in those practices.
No.
The parents are scared out of their mind to let the kids play football, number one. So when they are on the field, they're not allowed to tackle each other. This is starting at 7, 8, 9. They don't tackle at all at that level anymore.
Yes, you're right.
So now they can't practice at any level. You're not allowed to hit anywhere. These practices, you can't do anything. So, yeah, in our mind, it's funny, my TV screen has a like by Antonio Pierce. They're showing that on the screen again. My God. But in our mind, you're at practice and you're working on wrapping and driving someone to the ground. There's none of that. I said to Colin yesterday, wow, how does a coach hold you, Colin, if you're late for practice or you fall asleep in a meeting or you're late to a meeting? How are you held accountable? They're not running Oklahoma drills out there. They're not doing gassers and wind sprints until they puke. You know, those days are done. How do they get? They get fined $5,000. Okay, to a player. To us, $5,000 doesn't sound like he's saying to a player at $5,000. Well, for a Colin Thompson level player,
$10,
right? For a Colin Thompson level player, $5,000 is a big deal. But guess what? Colin Thompson ain't late for a practice.
I know.
You know, he's there on time, ready to report. It's the other guys that you're the top of the level rosters that you're saying.
Well, you know, this is a bigger problem when you talk. And Big talked about. Big is the most old school of old school guys you can find in the NFL right now, and he was talking about the tackling stuff. And you know, he was asked, how do you fix it when you don't practice tackling? And he's answering it. And I'm thinking to myself at the moment, I'm thinking about society as a whole because I'm a weirdo, and this is how I think about things. And I'm like, boy, how did we get here?
Well,
it's like,
listen, I had the same thought you did. Is they don't tackle at any level in practice. We just assume. Like Zander said, you're a professional. You tackle. Where did these guys ever practice? Where did they ever tackle? Now we're getting guys into the league who have gone through a generation of they never tackled. They didn't tackle in practice. I'm telling you right now, the junior leagues, the junior leagues where we are, they cannot tackle. They're not allowed to do anything.
Oh, yeah.
God, yeah. You know, so high school, they're not tackling.
No.
College, they're not tackling. So they're not tackling. You know, the flag football leagues, there's 7-on-7 leagues all over the place. You ain't tackling there, that's for sure. But you look at some of these tackles, these guys run with their shoulders, heads down, and they just try to run and hit you hard enough that you lose your balance and fall. There's no wrapping. There's no driving. You can't do that in practice anymore.
Yeah. Mike, last question for me, man. This team is 2-2 going into the bye. I don't know why it feels like it's 0-4. What's your biggest concern on this team coming out of the bye? I mean, we talked about the offense, is it the defense? What are a couple things that you're looking at? Like, this is going to be an issue. This team has to fix this, or they're not going anywhere.
Well, I said, we're 4 games in, and you look at all these teams. You watch you watch a team play 2 games, and you're like, the Saints, their offense is really good. Then you watch them play 2 more games, and you're like, maybe their offense isn't all that good. Right. So there are no absolutes after 4 games. We talk about how this is the preseason. Well, now we're getting into October where the preseason of the regular season is kind of ending, and you're coming out of a bye. If coming out of the bye and they get Brown, Smith, and Lane back, and their offense is still having some issues, 2 to 3 weeks down the road, then I think you can look at the offense and say, all right, what the heck's going on here? Because, they have enough talent offensively that shouldn't be an issue. It's the defensive side of the ball. It's where are they going to get pass rush? Where? And if you can't get that consistently week in and week out, you're constantly going to be having discussions on Monday of can't get stopped, can't get off the field. Now, some weeks you do and some weeks you don't, but you can't consistently do it. And if you can't consistently do it, you're going to constantly be in a situation where you're going to have to outscore teams 35-28. They should have the offense to be able to do that, but that's not a recipe for a Super Bowl, which is ultimately what everybody wants. So I think the biggest question is moving forward. The offense should take care of itself, you hope, with getting healthy, but where are they going to get pass rush with this team? I don't see where they get consistent pass rush with the current roster they have. That's the biggest problem.
Hopefully not going to be Bryce Huff, Mike.
Doesn't seem that way.
I didn't like the Huff signing when they made it, and I like it less now. So
John, I got to be honest. John convinced. I was thinking Huff was going to be.
Yeah, I was high on.
John convinced me. I did Birds 365 every day in the off season. Yeah. John had me fired up for Bryce Huff.
Well, I'm in the Rich Cimini camp. I'm like, I saw the guy play well at the NFL level.
Yeah, no, I get it. I get why you said it for
sure.
Hey,
maybe they're using him wrong, and that's a possibility, but I don't know. To me, he looked like a one-trick pony. That to me,
yeah, but that's fine. But use that trick. I know,
problem. But this is how I described it on my show. Is Bryce Huff was a nobody who came out of right field, undrafted, and all of a sudden he has 10 sacks in his contract year. You know what teams are doing that are playing the Eagles? They sign a 51. Who the hell is this guy that just signed a 51? Let's go watch what the hell he's doing.
A lot of interest, Mike. A lot of interest.
Well, I'm not saying he didn't have a lot of interest, but I'm saying teams that are getting ready to play the Eagles this year, seeing a guy signing a $51 million deal who comes out of nowhere and gets 10 sacks, I'm saying, let me watch this guy on tape and see what he's doing. Maybe I didn't pay enough attention to a guy I never heard of before. And there you go. You get a guy who doesn't have a whole heck of a lot in the repertoire that we've now studied a little bit more.
In fact, one of the teams that was trying to sign him was Minnesota, and they lost out and got Jonathan Grenard, who's got, I think, 4 or 5 sacks.
Yeah.
They assessed that Huff was better than Jonathan Grenard. And maybe he is, maybe he isn't. He hasn't been this year. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Always, but there are a lot. I think there's that narrative that the Eagles went out of nowhere. Nobody else was given break. The people in New York think the Jets were insane for letting them go.
Yeah.
And
no, I'm not saying that the Eagles came out. I'm just saying he came out of nowhere. Huff. He was a guy that was undrafted. He
wasn't a big name. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. He didn't come up through the ranks as a big pass rushing name. I get what you're saying.
No, well, he was undrafted, but that gets into the TJ Edwards replay. I mean, undrafted guys can turn into good players, but that's another story. We've kept you too long. I apologize. At Mike Gil Show X platform.
I don't wear my glasses for this segment, so I can't see or read it. I have no idea what time it is. I can't see the clock on my screen.
Yeah, we kept you late. 9:08. 97.3 ESPN, the Sports Baths.
I apologize for this light line behind me today. I've been trying to get in front of it.
That's right. It looks good. It's illuminating you as you make your fantastic.
You have more gravitas because you look agreed. Like the skies are illuminating you. Make sure you listen to the Sports Bash locally, ESPN South Jersey. Mike does a tremendous job, 2 to 6. I'll be on there later if you don't get enough of us. Thanks, Mike.
All right, guys. See you, everybody.
Mike, thanks, man. See you. There's Mike Gil joining us on Birds 365. Great stuff from Mike.
We didn't get much to the defense because we were talking. We got to
do it a little bit at the end, and kind of makes me wonder, John, the Bryce Huff stuff, because and I agree with you where you're like players first. But I wonder, if Bryce Huff did get signed in Minnesota, would he stink this bad, or would Brian Flores have him playing?
No, we wouldn't, because Brian Flores would.
Right. So is that a case though of it's not the player first, it is the coaching?
Well, when I say players first, your job as a coach is to take players a little bit farther. Nick talks about it than where they can get on their own.
Yeah, and I get it's not going to be a blanket across all.
No, you have to have the raw talent. I think the problem with Bryce Huff here is that Vic is trying to turn him into a 3-down player by hell or high water to justify the contract. And I think if he were in Minnesota, and you'll never know because he's not. Right. I think Brian Flores, the type of guy he is, and you can watch him, he's going to utilize what he has, and he's going to utilize the one trick. And I think if the Eagles scale back to that, you'll see a better Bryce Huff. But I don't see any evidence they're going to scale back to that. They already do it to a certain extent, certain players. They have a bunch of pass rushers. Jihad Ward is a perfect example of a guy. He doesn't do much else, but he uses them. So I mean, there's evidence that he'll use that type of player. Now, if you sign him to 50, maybe the same thing happens there, and they say, well, he's got to be a more inclusive part of the defense. You don't know how this stuff is going to shake out, and no volume, no situation is the same. So that's one of the things I always preach against. Just because somebody's good somewhere else doesn't mean they're going to be good in your system, in your scheme, the way you're using them. And that's evidence. Forget about Minnesota was trying to sign him. Already you see it on paper. He played well for the New York Jets as a one-trick pony. He already did it. And for people that say it was 1 year, it wasn't 1 year, it was 2 years. And the pressure percentages were off the charts for 2 years.
I guess the 1 year was just a double-digit sack.
Yeah.
But he played solid for 2 years.
Yeah. And, well, as a pass rusher. And he didn't do anything else, which is legitimate. If you're trying to evaluate him as a 3-down player, it's legitimate to bring up he never did anything else. But it's also legitimate to say, well, he was a really good pass rusher. And he was a really good pass rusher, not in college, at the NFL level. So something's wrong. And maybe it's Bryce. It's part Eagles' fault, part Bryce Huff's fault.
Yeah. Well, I did see the Baldy thing. I mean, you mentioned that to me earlier in the week, and a couple people in the chat are mentioning it. It is a little bit, it might be a little bit of a case of them just. I think what you said is perfect. They're trying to justify the contract by making him a 3-down player, and it's taking away everything that he did good in the process. And now he's, basically worthless to the defense through 4 games.
He has been to this point, which has got to be a disappointment. And maybe they'll figure it out in the bye, and maybe they'll scale it back. But it's not looking good right now. There's no way to frame it in a positive direction right now.
Yeah, no. John, real quick, and I don't want to get back into this because we talked about it enough today with the whole Slay stuff. But what's the Eagles' schedule this week with the bye? Like, are they in the NovaCare complex at all this week, or is Slay and CJ Gardner-Johnson going to be away from each other for a week before they're
well, they're going to. I think they're not going to fight.
No, I know, but I do think. Look, like I said, and we talked about it, CJ Gardner-Johnson's he's an interesting fella. I mean, he's not. He gives a shit.
He is.
Yeah.
Yes,
so.
They have to have.
Saying, hey, Darius, it's okay. I still love you. I think there might be. I don't think it's going to be big, but I think they're going to talk for sure.
They were already in the building this week. The team, they're not practicing. You have to have collectively bargained. You have to have 4 consecutive days off. You have to have Saturday and Sunday off. So usually most teams do it Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You can do it Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. We'll have a better indication of that when the Eagles get back next week, but not a lot going on. But yeah, they had meetings, and I obviously have the discussion. Don't be an idiot on your little mini vacation. A lot of guys go away. A lot of guys go home. A lot of guys take those mini vacations. So yeah, I mean, they'll be off over the weekend and 4 consecutive days, but I don't think there's going to be any fisticuffs or any
steel cage match like coming like Slager.
Well, they're going to have to deal with Dom if they do that. So
yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's much more important that they learn how to tackle. And I don't learn. I don't know. I don't know how you learn how to tackle when you don't practice tackling. And like I said, I got into that a little bit with Mike. How did we get here, man? Like, where is the common sense in society? I mean, nobody, to my knowledge, nobody is making people play professional football. Adults play professional football. It's a violent sport. It's a dangerous sport. I've always had this conversation. I respect people who tell me they want to ban football. I respect those people because it's too dangerous. Irv Muchnick, I always say, the author, has that conversation with me, and I go, all right, let's have it. I disagree because I think you should be able to make your own decisions as an adult. But we should be able to stipulate as a society, guess what? If you play this game, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get banged up. You're going to get injured. If you play the game the way you're supposed to play the game, they don't. And you're sitting there asking Vic Fangio, and it's a very good question. It's a very legitimate question. How do you fix tackling when you don't practice tackling? And poor Vic has got to answer that question. And that's why I always say, my buddy Seth Jr., it's like Seth always goes the old school route, and I have tremendous respect for Seth. But it's irrelevant what you did because they can't do it. Like, it's irrelevance. They're not allowed to do what you did as an old school player.
Right.
I mean, is it worth having the discussion?
They got to be better than 15 missed. I get it. There's got to be somewhere in the middle that we can meet, though. I mean,
but how do you practice tackling? That was the question. How do you practice?
No, you don't. I guess you don't. Tackle? I mean, you're right.
And basically, you look at film and you run tackling cycles in practice, and you go up and you talk about technique and form and what you're supposed to do, and then all of a sudden, here comes Derrick Henry at you at 21 miles an hour. Well, good luck. Good luck.
Good luck with that one. Real quick, John, we got a super chat from earlier about the Slay stuff. Abe says, if Z was clowning you, J-Mac, wouldn't that affect you? And I think his point is that, bad look.
I can't control. I've said a million times. I've learned so much about social media. I used to clap back against many more people than I do today. Now, because I've learned over the years, look, this person or this person is not interested in a real conversation. They are just trying to clown you. It's human nature to get upset by it. I used to get upset by it a lot more than I do today.
Yeah, but that's different than, the leader of your defense, right, doing it to you.
It's the same thing. It's human nature. I'm answering the question. If you clown me, which you feel free to do on the show, everybody does it. I mean, but of course, if it hits a sore spot or whatever, or you're having a bad day, it can happen to anybody. That's why I say stay off if you're an athlete, because you get it times a million. I get it times much more than the average person compared to an athlete. They get it way more than me. So it incrementally goes up. And it ain't fun. It ain't fun when somebody's being a jerk to you.
Yeah.
But, I mean, there's two ways you can handle it. And you give a troll air, and they're just going to keep going and going and going. If you ignore them, if you make it blatantly clear they're not serious people, it's the better way to go. It would be nice if people would be, cordial to each other, but that's not the real world.
Yeah, the problem is Slay invited more, exponentially more amount of those trolls, to his own teammate by what he did as a captain, and I think that's where the problem really lies. I mean, I get it. We can argue about social and all this bullshit and trolls and everything like that, but you're a leader, man, and it's 2024.
Darius Slay is only a captain because his teammates voted him to be a captain.
Well, no, I'm not.
That should shut everybody down about the captain.
I know, but as a captain, don't you think that warrants a different version of understanding the room of when you're on Micah Parsons' podcast? Yeah, you're right. Once you put the mic up, you're making a mistake, but you don't have to sit there and fucking laugh at your teammate. Whether you said anything wrong or not is not the point.
Has anybody ever seen one interview from Darius Slay? He giggles the whole freaking time.
It's true.
I mean, he wasn't laughing at CJ Gardner.
No, but that was the optic of it, and I think that's
that's the optic of people who don't understand. Have they ever? An Eagles fan should understand. They talk about Slay all the time. He's not serious, and he should be more serious. And they want, if you're not serious, they want you to be more serious. If you are serious, like Jalen Hurts, they want you to be less serious. You can't win in these circumstances. So my only advice to the Eagles is stay away from it, but they're not going to listen to that advice.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's get to our commercial break. We have BLG coming up next. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Hit that like button, everybody, for us. Appreciate all the people in here. We got a great crowd. As always, appreciate all of you guys. Appreciate our members and appreciate our 2 super chats today. So thanks, everybody. Hit that like button. We got Brandon Lee Goutman from Bleeding Green Nation coming up next. Before I get to the break, let me tell you guys about our great friends at BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa and check out that promo, 150% sign-up bonus on that first deposit. And then you get 125% on your second and third deposits if you use the promo code YouTube 150, and that's all up to $2,000 back. So you can deposit less and bet with more at BetUS. Go to betus.com.pa. That's betus.com.pa PA. They have the fastest payouts in the industry, 24/7 customer support, and they're the proud partner here on Birds 365 and JAKIB Sports. So thanks, everybody, and make sure you go check out BetUS. Let's get to our commercial break. 3 minutes. We'll be back with BLG from Bleeding Green Nation.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
He's blocked well and tries to cut through the middle. Oh!
Your gut says Miami is going to win, and you should take the over. Your gut also said your NFT selfies would only go up in value. They didn't. But your head is on Sports Grid and knows the QB is in concussion protocol. The backup has a 45 QBR against the zone coverage. The New York D has the most sacks in the league. So yeah, trust your head. It's smarter to be on Sports Grid.
Score and save at Southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com.
Hi everybody, my name's Jason Lombardi. I'm an inspector at DryTech. At DryTech we offer three major services, the first one being basement waterproofing, the second service we offer is foundation and structural repairs, and then the third service that we offer is mold remediation. If you feel you are having a waterproofing issue, give DryTech a call or check us out online.
Heading down the shore, have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood.
Plan your stay in the Wildwoods today.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Brandon Lee Gouton of Bleeding Green Nation. BLJ, we're 2-2, and it feels like we're 0-4, brother. How you doing on this Wednesday morning?
Well, after watching a game like that this past weekend, I'm not really devastated that the Eagles aren't playing this coming weekend.
I will say this, Brent. I don't agree with that. I look at this team and say, I'm actually a little bit higher on this team because they're 2-2, and what they rolled out in Tampa was, let's be honest. I mean, if you don't have Lane Johnson, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, you're screwed. And I think there's this mentality of, should they have been a little bit better? Yeah, but should have been. They won that game? No, you're rolling out Paris Campbell and Johnny Wilson and John Ross. I mean, I don't think it's that bad. I think the defense is bad. We'll get to that in a moment. But the offense, I think it's going to be fine. I have questions about the quarterback, but I think it's going to be fine. Overall, they're going to be very good. It's just a matter of how good.
Yeah, I mean, I think getting those key guys back is obviously going to help. They were 1.5 favorites on the road. I think it should have been
astonishing. That's Vegas's fault.
I think it should have been more competitive, and yeah, it should have been better to the point where, I mean, you can't have your 3 first drives, so the offense result in -5 yards total.
But Dallas Goedert catch the ball, and they got that first down. Who knows? I'm just saying, there's things. It's terrible to go 3 and out 3 consecutive times, but they had opportunities to extend drives, and who knows how that changes the games. I thought it would be much closer. I'm not saying I thought Tampa. What did I pick, Zander? 20-17. I picked Tampa.
Yeah.
I thought it would be a low-scoring, close game. So by no means am I trying to say they played well. They played very, very poorly. But I think a lot of it is self-explanatory. And boy, I think people expect Kellen Moore to whip up some kind of magic berry dust that gets Paris Campbell open consistently. I don't get that part of it.
Yeah, I think it's again, the offense, there's hope for that unit. Like we said here, the injuries, people get healthy. I think that side of the ball can get back to playing at a pretty, at least if not a high level, pretty solid level. Whereas the defense, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know where the hope is as much for that unit. Obviously, they were great against the Saints, but going into this game against the Bucs, I had written for bleedinggreennation.com. I was really interested to see how Vic Fangio fared after that Saints team ran 11 personnel at the 30th highest rate in the league. And meanwhile, the Bucs entered last week with the third highest rate of 11 personnel. So that was a big change in how, the Eagles were able to defend that team. And clearly it did not go well.
I'm glad you brought that up because I do think styles make bites. And I think the Eagles are better when they can use those 5- and 6-man fronts that he used in New Orleans. And when they get their nickel defense out there, they're just terrible. And Vic was trying to explain it yesterday and evidently told them to get tighter in coverage and they didn't, or whatever you want to believe. Obviously 15 missed tackles you're not going to win football games if you miss 15 tackles. I don't know how you practice tackling when you don't tackle in practice, but that's a league-wide problem. Where do you start if you're self-scouting this defense and saying, where's BLG starting to fix this defense?
Well, I don't think it's the only reason that the nickel defense has been bad, but I mean, when you have Avonte Maddox, a player the Eagles cut earlier this year, playing like 90% of the snaps in all these games except the Saints game, and a guy too who, the Eagles moved him out of that starting nickel job in training camp. They had Quinyon Mitchell playing that position there. Like this, it's very kind of bizarre how much they've leaned on Avonte Maddox. And I know Cooper DeJean missed time in training camp, but I mean, you would think, and Vic Fangio's comments maybe sort of point towards that, Cooper DeJean is on the rise here, and we could see more of him after the bye. I mean, that's certainly something that seems worth trying to me. Not to say that a rookie is instantly going to fix everything, but also just the potential that even if he does not play well from the jump, that he could get better later on in the season. And it's kind of the point of playing young players sometimes is, dealing with those startup costs. I think that's somewhere I would start is taking Avonte Maddox. Everything has been targeted by opposing offenses off the field and getting DeJean in there. And obviously you can mix in Sidney Brown too, with him potentially getting back here and more so probably on those early run downs there. Having him as a nickel defender could also help. So that's where I would start.
BLG, do you have a sliver of hope inside right now that Bryce Huff is going to have any significant contributions to this football team moving forward? Because we talk about the defense. Pass rush is number one in the league. I mean, this is why people pay so much for great edge rushers. You got to get to the quarterback. It also makes life much easier in your secondary. Our pass rush has been brutal. I said on the show, 36-year-old Brandon Graham is the best guy on the whole D line because he shows up every week. Jalen Carter's great, but if you take days off, you're not going to be the greatest. Any hope on Bryce Huff right now coming out of the bye week?
Yeah, I wouldn't put the defensive performance on the pass rush as much, obviously, in that game against the Bucs, just because of how fast Baker Mayfield's getting out the ball. I don't really know.
2 seconds, he was slinging that thing.
Yeah, and Josh Sweat had a sack, Brandon Graham had a sack. Not to say the pass rush was amazing, but I don't think like this, or as opposed to like the Falcons game. I think that was more the pass rush just like not winning when they had chances to do so. So certainly, I'm concerned still about Bryce Huff. I'll see it. I'll believe it when I see it at this point. I don't have a lot of faith in that happening just because how invisible he's been. He did log a tackle. He did get in the box score. So I guess that's a step in the right direction. His first solo tackle of the season.
Yeah, how about that?
Yeah.
He's on pace. Now the NFL screwed us with that 17th game.
Yeah.
He'd be on pace for 4 tackles, but maybe he can get that 5th one in the extra game. I asked Vic yesterday, And I believe him. And the reason I believe him is because he generally tells the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't say that about every coach, but when you're talking about the soft coverage, I asked him, when does that adjustment come to try to get him to play a little bit tighter, basically? And he said, we tried to communicate that early, that we had to get tighter, but credit to them, they threw it and caught it better than we defended it. Obviously, didn't go too far into depth, but he said they tried to communicate it early. So, if you're telling the guys to play tighter and they don't, is that a concern for you?
Well, I wonder how much of that too is kind of like him saying we did make an adjustment, the players couldn't execute the adjustment, which is also a problem. And I think coming out of that game, there's a stat posted about how like the Eagles have played the most off coverage in the NFL.
88%.
Yeah. As Nick Sirianni would say, a wise man avoids all extremes, but not in this case.
Or motion, but now
Yeah.
So a wise man evidently does a lot of extremes, but I probably said it to you because I've said it to everybody. I think the league has figured this scheme out. So many people have played it. It's happened in the past. Tony Dungy had covered 2. Everybody copied it. It's a cyclical thing. And I think so many people copied this particular defensive scheme. Quarterbacks have seen it so much. They understand what to do against it now. It's not as surprising to them with the post snap, spinning off into coverage. And the Eagles are still playing it. And they've been playing it for 4 years. And we talked about these same things with Jonathan Gannon. And everybody's surprised that they play off coverage. That's what it is. Even though you got the best guy to run it, is the problem the scheme, BLG?
Well, I thought it was interesting how apparently leading up to the game last week, Jalen Carter was talking about how he was excited basically to get a chance to play against Baker Mayfield because he expected him to hold on to the ball.
Yeah.
And, if that was the expectation, the Bucs were going to hold on to the ball. I mean, that seems like poor coaching to the extent where, the Bucs did not. That was clearly not their plan at all. Their plan was quick game, the whole game. Yeah. So I think that's a problem. Certainly, especially when we're hearing that from the players and they're expecting this something to go totally different than it actually goes. They weren't ready. They weren't ready for how the Bucs were going to come out and attack them. That we saw that much from the evidence of the results, but even going into the game, their words indicated as much.
But, I don't have as much as a problem with that. I'll tell you why, Brandon, is the fact that, you look at New Orleans. They scouted them very well. They play a ton of 12. They max protect, play action, outside stretch run. They scouted them very well. As you mentioned, on paper, Baker holds on to the football. So I don't have a problem coming into the game thinking that. And that's why when Big said we tried to make the adjustment pretty quickly, nobody listened, essentially. But when they do come out with that quick game, you got to go, whoa, and that's good job to Tampa for changing up their tendencies. But then you got to adjust. And I think Big said he tried to adjust, but for whatever reason, the players weren't listening or engaging in what they were supposed to do early. So I don't have a problem with that, but I have a problem with just the general philosophy. And maybe it's the whole league of being so passive all the time. Like you think about, especially in this town, you think about defense, you want aggression and everybody wants aggression. And some of it's overblown and all that stuff. You can't blitz every down and all that nonsense. But boy, you'd like to see a little bit. It's so passive.
Yeah. I think you would have forced the issue at some point, right? Like at some point, you can't do it all the time, like you're saying. But there has to be a better balance of that, where there are times and situations where that calls for being more aggressive than not just sitting back all the time as kind of a default.
Yeah. It's getting big. I know Jody, my old partner Jody McDonald, texted me last night because he's always obsessed with the blitz, and he asked me what's the blitz percentage for the Eagles, and I looked it up for him. It's 22.8%, right in the Vic Fangio wheelhouse. I remember saying to Zander, he's like, what's it going to be? It's 23%. I said it all off season. That's what he does. He's been a defensive coordinator forever. He's right in his wheelhouse, 22.8%. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 teams behind the Eagles, which is usually that's, near bottom 5 at 20. So the whole league is going this direction of, playing more too high, playing more shell coverage, making teams go down the field, not being aggressive. The teams that are aggressive, Denver, Minnesota, Tampa Bay with Todd Bowles, Kansas City with Steve Spagnuolo. Those are the defense the Eagles fans want to see. They want to see that aggression. But the whole league is going in one direction. When the whole league goes in one direction, BLG, it tells me, guess what? At that point, it's whoever does it best. If everybody's doing the same thing. I want the guy who's doing something different. That used to be big. It's no longer big. Any problems with that aspect of just going along with the crowd?
I mean, that just seems kind of antithetical to what the Eagles believe in or purport to believe in at a high level, right? Like, part of the reason they go for it, and Jeffrey Lurie comes out in 2017 and says, we're going to go for it on fourth down, is to have an edge over the rest of the competition. And that's, something to talk about with Nick Sirianni a lot. And what kind of edge is he giving you when we evaluate him? So yeah, I would think in theory, you're looking to zag a little bit when everyone else is zigging, or however you want to look at that. I mean, that's kind of like what the Eagles did with the Saquon Barkley signing, right?
Yeah.
In a way that where, okay, everyone's like, don't pay running backs. Okay.
And I'm waiting for that, BLG. They always take pride in doing that. I'm waiting for them to make that turn on defense.
Yeah. It's not. I think it's
not coming. It's not coming now.
Yeah. I think they clearly have, liked Vic Fangio for a little bit here, but it's kind of at a point where this isn't in 2019 or whatever it is when Sean McVay and all these guys from that system are talking about how Vic Fangio is the top guy that stops them. That's been a few years now.
Yeah. And by the way, you're right. That's the reason why there's so many Fangio's defense, because it was Sean McVay and it was all those guys, the Sean McVay clones, that said, this is the toughest defense. And that's what Nick said. That's why he wanted this defense run as an offensive guy. This is the toughest. This gives me the most problems. I don't think that's the case anymore. And everybody's stuck in the stasis.
Yeah, here's a super chat on this topic, and I want to read it to both of you and get your reaction. BLG, I'll go to you first. He says, we won with short, and thanks, Caleb, by the way, for the super chat. We won with shorts. You can argue the bend but don't break style has cost us a Super Bowl and was responsible for most of our losses since Nick. Is that an overreaction, BLG, or do you agree with the commenter?
Well, I'm a big Jim Schwartz guy, so you're preaching to the choir here.
I'm a big Jim Schwartz guy as well, but I will remember people, to be fair, the Eagles were worse on defense at Super Bowl 52 than they were on Super Bowl.
And he'll tell you that. Jim will tell you that.
Yes, but what happened? They ultimately did make the play that mattered.
Yeah.
That was
the one play. Yeah.
John, and a credit to you. People judge the results, Johnny Mac.
Yeah, Jim's still upset about how they played in the Super Bowl.
So was Jeffrey Lurie after they lost, even after they won. He brought, remember that? Jeffrey Lurie brought up how bad their defense was after they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah, they were not good on defense. But overall, Jim's a heck of a defensive coordinator. And if Fletcher Cox was the guy who was literally depressed at the start of moving away from the Jim Schwartz scheme to this scheme, and he got over it and eventually started playing at a high level again. But I don't know. It's a little bit too passive for me, but it's been successful, and hopefully they can ramp it up and be that. But Vic got asked the question with the 15 missed tackles. How do you practice tackling when you don't tackle? How do you do that? Sometimes I just there are moments where I think in a weird way, BLG, and that was a moment where I thought to myself, I think Zach asked the question. I said, boy, how did we get here? We're asking Vic Fangio, how do you practice tackling when you don't tackle in practice? And nobody it's not like the Eagles are some kind of outlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we are. So is it just everybody's a bunch of bad tacklers, and it'll get a little bit better because it's not going to be 110 degrees every game day?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think part of it too is that this is like the startup costs of the Eagles not going as hard in camp. And I think we've seen that in years past too. Maybe the tackling probably got better over the course of the season, or at least it was the worst of it was more so early on. And that's probably just a cost the Eagles are going to live with if it means that they're relatively healthy, which they were entering the season, obviously, before all these guys got banged up more recently here once the game started. Yeah, so, I don't – it's obviously an issue. I don't think it's like, oh, they just can't tackle and they're hopeless in that regard. I think that, there's hope for the tackling getting a little bit better.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. BLG, obviously the biggest problem is the defense, but I got some questions on the offense as well, namely about the quarterback, Jalen Hurts. I want to get your take. I know you guys have a big fan section as well where people check in, leave their comments. I've noticed here, and I live in JAKIB land where I read of all of our viewers, I've noticed a change in terms of, I don't want to say they're turning on Jalen, but they're starting to want more from Jalen Hurts. Where are you on Jalen Hurts? We're 2-2. I mean, he's second in the league in turnovers. Where are you on Jalen Hurts right now, as an elite quarterback and the whole conversation of him here in Philly?
Yeah, I mean, 27 giveaways in the last 22 games, and it just feels like you go into every game, at least me, like you're waiting for it to happen. Yeah. You know it's going to happen at some point because it keeps happening, and there doesn't seem to be an end in sight for him. I think that, and look, we can like parse these again and say, okay, well, maybe he wasn't at fault of the specific one, but if you zoom out, I mean, that number is just, it's too big. And like, I know that, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, they're also up there in terms of the turnover leaders, but they're also not, with this past game aside, they're not like, Jalen Hurts is not tasked with carrying the entire offense the way those guys are, I think, on those teams. And part of those turnovers that happen for those other guys, in part because they're big play hunters and they're gonna do things and be aggressive, and sometimes they're gonna turn the ball over, but more often than not, it's worth it to make those big plays. And also in the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes is not turning the ball over at a high rate. He's taking care of it, in fact, very well in the postseason. So the turnovers are just a huge issue, and it's hard to really kind of like skate by that part. It's hard to like say like, well, if you just take away the turn, you can't. There's a huge issue, a huge sticking point. And we can, you can get into a lot of other things, and I think they're valid in terms of like Jalen not really utilizing his full, all the players on his team. And that's something we talked about in the offseason, going back to last year. There's other issues, but I mean, the turnovers are the one that has to get fixed above all else.
All right. Tell me if you get this with Jalen Hurts. I think the narrative, and I got this pretty hard yesterday because I tweeted something out about, the fan base, at least a large proportion thinks when things go bad, it's Nick Sirianni is taking over the play calling. When things go good, it's Kellen Moore. Then Seth Walder every once in a while puts out the motion numbers. And the Eagles are way up in motion from what they were with Nick Sirianni, but they're not where they were supposed to be with Kellen Moore, at least with his history. So you have all the conspiracy theorists thinking, oh, it's Nick's offense. Poor Kellen is in the same spot as Brian Johnson. At what point do people look at the quarterback and say maybe they're trying to help the quarterback out?
Yeah, or just, how much of it is the quarterback, right? Like how much of the tendencies we're seeing relates to him as opposed to just the offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
They're designed. By the way, you brought up Brian Johnson. Seems to be doing a nice job helping Jaden Daniels, at least. I don't know exactly, how much we're giving him the credit when Cliff King is calling the plays, but certainly he's not hurting Jaden Daniels, at least down there. So that's kind of funny. But yeah. And one of our writers, Johnny Page, who does a lot of good, all 22 film kind of breakdowns for us on bleedinggreennation.com. We'll have the reviews from the Bucks game up on our site, I'm sure, soon here. He mentioned this even before that motion usage was going around really yesterday on Twitter, but just mentioned that like from all his studying of a Kellen Moore offense, like this doesn't really resemble that so much to him. So I think there is something to that, and I don't think it's just about Sirianni. I do think it's about the quarterback too.
Yeah. BLG, how much do you think it's because I was wondering this too, and it's like we keep comparing it to Nick Sirianni and Kellen. Is it possible it's just what you have to do with the quarterback? Right, not even as a knock on them, but certain quarterbacks have different tendencies, different styles, different things they're good at and bad at. Everybody's like, it looks like Nick's offense. I'm like, well, it's still Kellen's offense. Maybe this is just the offense you have to run with Nick or with Jalen Hurts as the quarterback. Is that fair, or is that, or do you think I'm incorrect with that?
Well, it's what I think they have to run it with him, which becomes the reality of what it looks like. So. I think it's hard to just say, if the offense looks a lot like it did last year, it's hard to just say like, oh, it's all Nick, or, Brian Johnson and Kellen Moore just both happen to be bad. Like at some point the quarterback is becoming the common denominator there.
Yeah. Plus it's difficult. I mean, if you look at some of these things are so subjective. Seth Walder does it every once in a while. To my knowledge, the motion numbers, I don't think anybody does motion numbers I haven't seen it from anybody other than Seth, who gets it from ESPN's video tracking team or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit of, if you looked at the missed tackles, for instance, I think True Media had 12, Next Gen Stats had 16, the Eagles had 15. Point is, they missed a lot of tackles, but at times it gets subjective.
Sure.
They are using more motion, significantly more motion. So just from the standpoint of how much Nick is involved versus how much this is Kellen's offense, I mean, I believe me, I got a lot of passionate people saying it's completely Nick's offense because of how bad they were in Tampa Bay. Can you talk them off the ledge? Kellen Moore's calling this offense, game planning this offense. Do you see any evidence to the contrary?
I think, it's ultimately probably more Kellen Moore, but, Nick has a role, especially when I think, a big part of why they've struggled is these slow starts, which date back into last year. And they haven't scored a point in the first quarter in their last 6 games. And I feel like you would think that the game script would be, a key part of the operation and something that I think Nick Sirianni would, in my mind, at least be a little bit more involved with than the play calling later in the flow of the game, as much as he would be like, okay, this is the plan of attack we're going in with. This is what we're going to open it. This is going to be our opening script. This is how we're going to start the game. And those have sucked. They've been terrible. They've been really bad. They've gained like 17 yards combined, I think, on their opening drives this year. 1 first down, 3 punts, and the 1 interception in the Packers game. So, I think a lot of
they've been terrible early.
It's Moore's design, but I think Sirianni I got in the struggles of it as well.
Well, and I think but John, he's also muddied the water.
Oh, he should have never said what he said.
He admitted it. I mean, he's the one that created the fans.
Oh, I said today that the moment he said that,
I know you did, but I'm just saying to be consistent. It's like, I get you're upset with the fans pushing back.
Yeah, but I think from the standpoint, like, and BLG knows this, like, and Doug was a lot more above board on how he would handle game planning responsibilities. Like every assistant coach is responsible for some portion of the game plan. Mm-hmm. Jeff Stoutland with the running game is most obvious. But, you give 2 minutes to somebody, you give red zone to somebody. Like everybody's involved. All the major assistant coaches are involved with the game planning. And then Kellen Moore puts it together and puts the script together and calls the plays. It used to be Nick. And as the head coach, he can usurp them in theory at any time. Now, on the fourth, on the Saquon drop, when he no, that wasn't the, what is the 4th and 1 he took credit for? Which play was that?
In the Saints game, right?
Yeah. That when he said he basically said on
brotherly shove.
Yeah, thank you. The Saquon sort of sweep off the brotherly shove. And he took responsibility for that. Now I was like, is he trying to protect Kellen Moore? That's his job now, to be the lightning rod. Or did he really usurp him at that moment? I don't know. Could be either or. You know, he's protected AJ and Jalen in the past, as we know, and looked like a fool doing so. So he does protect his guys. But boy, that opened in a Pandora's box. He shouldn't have done that. He's creating more issues than needed to be created. But this is a bad setup. This gets to my point, BLG. From Dave, this is a bad setup, man.
Right.
And that's Jeffrey Lurie.
Yeah. I think to the bigger point here, the system allows for this kind of muddling of the waters that we're talking about, the setup. So that's part of the problem. And that's part of why I think he shouldn't have been back, because it's like you brought him. That's been my big thing this week. My big takeaway from this in the season, the Sirianni experience, is that it's how I felt after last season. You kind of, it is a half measure, I think, to bring him back and to try to, tweak things for the coordinators. I know that it would have been a bold move to fire the coach who just took you to the Super Bowl and had you 10-1 or whatever, and you've been in the playoffs every year with. I get that. Guess what? This organization, as we just talked about with the zigging and the zagging thing, they pride themselves on bold moves. I think firing your head coach of that would have been a bold move. I think it would have been like akin to going for it on 4th down. And I think it was out of character for this organization to then keep him. I think they did what they thought. I think they didn't want to fire him. They didn't want to have to do it. They didn't want the optics of that, so they didn't, even though they might have known they should have.
They played it safe. But I do think the other thing they care about a lot, BLJ, like they care about being ahead of the pack, is they care about the perception of themselves. And after firing Doug, which, many didn't like, and then you have a dude who goes to the playoffs 3 straight years and marches to the Super Bowl, you fire him. People are going to start to wonder, why, do I really want to coach there? They've had 2 guys go to the Super Bowl and get canned. I think they cared about that a lot as well.
Sure, but it's like, do you want to win, or do you want to, do you care about your perception?
And I think Jeffrey didn't want to be labeled as reactionary, firing another coach after a Super Bowl so soon. I think that's the biggest part of it. At Brandon Gouton, make sure you follow BLG on the X platform, Bleeding Green Nation, as he mentioned.com. Tremendous daily read there. Get you all your Eagles information in one spot. All right, I'll end it with the social media stuff. What do you do with these guys, man? They just can't stop shooting themselves in the foot. But you can't stop them. I mean, you can't ban it. It's part of they grew up with it. This is the first generation of NFL player that grew up with social media, really. It's a part of their lives. But boy, man, AJ, Slay, CJ, Kenny Gainwell, Devin White, it just creates so many problems, and they're not real problems. They're just distractions. What do you do?
Yeah, it's not a good look, I think, the Devin White one. When you're in the middle of the game and one of your players, a player that the Eagles gave $3.5 million. He doesn't
even play, by the way. Who cares about Devin White at this stage?
Well, who cares? But yeah, it's just like, I think the one that's most troublesome to me is Slay. Yeah, because that's a guy who has a C on his chest. He voted a team captain. And I think it is the least team captain behavior to go on social media after the game and then tell everyone how good you are after the Eagles just got their
6 Pro Bowls. 6 Pro Bowls.
Like, that's just, and he has apologized, but man, it's just, and that's not out of character for him. Like, he's done stuff like that in the past before. This is a really
every
deep
week almost.
This is a deep something. This is a deep cut here, but like, I remember back in 2020, I think it was the first season with the Eagles, I think he had his first interception in that Cowboys game late in the year, same game where like Deshaun Jackson had that touchdown catch from Jalen Hurts. And the Eagles got, boat raced in that game. They got destroyed, their whole defense. But after the game, Darius Slay is like tweeting left and right about his first pick with the Eagles. It's like, just kind of not really getting it to me. Doesn't really seem to understand either a lot of things, but especially in this town and how it plays in this city. It kind of seems tone deaf at best to me.
Don't you think also with the CJ Gardner-Johnson, specifically that point, like you got to know who you're working with. And as you mentioned, he's a captain. Like CJ Gardner-Johnson cares about this shit. He clearly cares a lot about it. Now I wonder if there's going to be some level of a fracture in the locker room that starts, because the reality is CJ's a loud, boisterous guy. He's not just going to sit there and take it like a dog. He's going to have a problem with it. And he's probably going to say something, and he might even hold a grudge, because that's the kind of guy I think CJ Gardner-Johnson is. And he showed he is that way with other players. Now, I don't want to make too much of it right now, but I do wonder as the captain if that was just a total lapse of judgment by Darius Slay, whether what he said was right or wrong.
Yeah, again, I just think it's just an all-around bad kind of optics thing where, you're going on Micah Parsons' podcast too. It's just like, is this like, can he not do that? No.
Is it that important?
Do it. Yeah. But like, it's just like, who do you like? Who
do it in the off season?
What's the upside here? Like, what are you really getting at? What are you winning here? I don't think he's doing himself any favors.
And by the way, BLG, Micah got in trouble with Cowboys fans when he lauded Lane Johnson for Lane's play. I mean, it's sort of a new era of sports, and these guys are friends and they like each other, and obviously the fan bases hate each other. But if I'm the Eagles, I don't know how to stop it, so I can't criticize them for it. I mean,
it's one thing to be friends with other players. I think you're never going to stop that, obviously, but try and avoid, talking about the most loud, obnoxious player on your defense and laughing about it with another player.
By the way, are you getting to the point where like Howie should have went in a different direction at safety? I mean, they tried to get Xavier McKinney. It didn't work out. But if you think about, people would say Justin Simmons, thinking about, he's better than Reed Blankenship. No, but maybe Justin Simmons over a certain someone that shall not be named.
I think CJ is obviously, he's made some big plays this year, and the stop in the Falcons game.
That was a great play.
Should have been a game play for them. So I don't want to say he's been all bad, but obviously the bad has outweighed the good. And if you go by Pro Football Reference, quarterbacks have a 153.3 pass rating when they're throwing his way.
I'm told that's not good.
It's almost near perfect.
That's what they say. That ain't good.
I think my thing with CJ is that, look, the attitude and then all that, I think that's valuable or it has value in it, but it can't substitute for talent and like in playing well. Like, it's great that he plays a passion and the energy and all of that. It just doesn't matter if he's playing poorly. Like, that's the thing. And if you're touting the signing because it's so great that he's going to bring the attitude, like, yeah, that should be part of it, but it can't be the main reason. And I think just people had a little bit of, a rosier view of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's play from what he was in 2022 when he was excellent, to be clear. And obviously, I think he led the league in interceptions. But my thing with that, and a big reason why the Eagles didn't even re-sign him, I think, is because they felt like this is not exactly the player we want to pay for at his peak. He's probably not going to be that moving forward. Like, that was his peak. And not to say he can't play well again. But I just think that, like, that shouldn't have been the baseline expectation. What you're getting out of Chauncey Gardner-Johnson every single season is getting him coming up with 6 interceptions. So I do think that there's a higher view of him coming into this season than there should have been, just based on the attitude, based on the nostalgia factor. And I think he can turn it around. I think he can play better than he has this year, but I mean, it better happen fast. Yeah, he has to.
The questions are mounting. BLG, thanks for giving us some extended time today, man. We appreciate it. Make sure you guys follow BLG on Twitter at Brandon Gouton and read all his work at Bleeding Green Nation. BLG, thanks for joining today, man. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, bud.
There's BLG. Good stuff from BLG. Johnny Mack went a little overtime here today. A lot of good conversation on the show today. Enjoyed it very much. Appreciate everybody in the chat. Got a great crowd in here as always. Make sure you guys hit that like button for us. One last super chat, John. I didn't get to this. Caleb, sorry about that. Caleb says, bend but don't break is okay at times, but in key moments, you must be able to switch up the QB clock and give them something to worry about. Caleb, I would agree for sure. And we'll see if Vic Fangio is able to do that.
I will say, on the bend, that not everybody, obviously situational football. I mean, Brian Flores played bend but don't break and let Green Bay back in the game. Like everybody plays bend. It's not bend but don't break versus aggression.
Right. Like there's nuance into when each of it is used.
And Jim Schwartz used to get killed for the picket fence. Guess what? That's bend but don't break.
Yeah,
when he would roll back, and he played obviously aggressive, especially with the front. One gap attack.
Good context right there, Johnny. Man.
Most of the time. So, I mean, well, that's where really defensive coordinators set themselves apart by being able to toggle back and forth depending on situation. And that's typically where Vic has been very good. And I expect him to be very good in that part of it. And people just haven't gotten to see, because they haven't gotten into a whole bunch of third and long situations. That's when you'll see more aggressiveness. But, I do think there is a long history in this league, as I've said, of schemes being copied and eventually teams catching up. I think that has happened with this particular scheme.
Yep, no doubt. John, your final thoughts on today? We talked about a lot. CJ, we talked about Darius Slay and CJ Gardner and Jalen Hurts and a whole lot of things. Just your final thoughts on this Wednesday edition of Birds 365.
Well, we started there, and hopefully we can end it there and not get into it and get more into football moving forward. But I mean, this is an example. There's 70 players in there. When you talk about the practice squad and everybody else, even more when you talk about injury reserve. There's a lot of people, and not everybody gets along, and not everybody has the same personalities. It's not rare to Philadelphia. It's not unique to Philadelphia. And Slay and CJ. And there's some differences there. There's nothing wrong with differences being there, but if you're the Eagles, you would just wish that they would stop the unforced errors, but I don't know how you stop it.
We'll see. Good stuff today on Birds 365 from Johnny Mac. Good stuff from everybody in the chat. Hit that like button. We're up to 90. Can we get to 100 before we get out of here? Caleb, one more super chat says Vic did walk Slay up second half. I must admit. Did I read that right? Vic did walk Slay up second half. I must admit. John, did I misunderstand that?
No, in other words, they started getting a little bit tighter. And obviously and obviously Slay has had a long history of being one of the best press cover corners in the NFL. In a lot of ways, it's not a great fit for this scheme in theory. But as he ages,
it works.
He's still, I mean, and again, not everything is 100%. I think people get bogged down in that 100%. Nobody plays 100% something. There's some even the Eagles are 32nd in the league with press coverage, but they still play some press coverage. It's not 100% of not playing press coverage. So nothing is absolute. And, you look at the blitz percentage as I had them up because I was talking about it. Denver blitzes more than anybody else. They blitz 44.1% of the time. That means essentially 55.9% they're not blitzing. Nothing's 100% in this league. Same with coverage. You got cover 0, cover 1, cover 2, cover 3, cover 6, cover 8, bunch of different coverages and zone. Nobody plays the same thing 100% of the time.
Johnny Mac, good stuff today, man. Appreciate you doing it. You're not going down there today, are you?
No, not today.
Got a couple days off now, right? They're
bye week. I don't have a couple days.
No, I mean from going down there though, because they're not going
to have any access until next week. And then it's Cleveland week. So I think a lot that we got some time because it's a bye week. I know you want to go, but
No, that's okay.
A lot of people think I had this discussion with because Jody's old school, and he's like, "Why don't you practice more?" Not allowed to practice more.
Yeah,
collectively bargained. You're playing shitty. Practice more. That was the old school mentality. And before, they legislated it out of the game, and people would take advantage. Guess what? You lost. We're going to practice. Can't do it.
Yeah, no doubt. Appreciate everybody, by the way, checking in. John, real quick on After Hours here on Birds 365. I did get made a mock that I'll have to show you, and I didn't write it t-shirt. And I said, I got to get Johnny Mac's approval before I publish this thing out. But the JAKIB merch line is coming, and the I didn't write it has made the.
I prefer the Stop It.
The Stop It's good. I got one of those getting made too with the headphones on, so that's good. But you're right. I like to Stop It.
I like to Stop It. No, because the I didn't write it had to do with and obviously it was Jalen. It was Tim's piece, and Tim's
it was kind of an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, I mean, no, and people again, Jalen knows me, and he was looking at me, and he asked me, why are people talking about this? And I explained to him, that there's and I said, well, why are people doing it there? And I said, it's not my place. I said, I didn't write it. And luckily I didn't know Tim was behind me. And I was hoping he was there, but I didn't see him. I was in the front row, and he immediately chimed in and explained it was not a big deal, but people clipped the one thing and thought it was. Jalen wasn't upset. I wasn't upset. Tim wasn't upset. It was just him asking a question, but it was live.
It was a good moment, though. People liked it. They loved that moment of you.
Yeah,
I understand the context.
There's no context to it, and that's why I'm like, it's so overblown. But hey, have fun with it. If you want to have fun with it, have fun with it.
Johnny Mac is a star in the city of Philadelphia. Good stuff, John. Great show today, man. Appreciate everybody checking in. My man Terry Hayes, John, he was our first legend member. Terry, I'm going to DM you on Twitter. I think we follow each other over on there. JAKIB Sports is going to send Terry to a game, if he wants, to a game free of charge for being.
Might not want to after that Tampa game.
Yeah, right. Well, I'll do something for him if he doesn't want to do that. I'll send him a big care package of some sorts. But it pays to be first, John, and he supports us in a big way. So we want to do something nice for Terry. So, Terry, I'll reach out to you over on X or wherever if you want to DM me here. Email me, Zander@jakibmedia.com. That's fine too. So Terry, appreciate it. Johnny Mac, great show today, man. I'll talk to you tomorrow morning. All right, brother?
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody, for doing it today. We'll see you tomorrow morning on Birds 365.
You've been listening to Birds 365, the destination for the passionate Eagles football fan who bleeds green. If it's Eagles football, we're talking about it. Debate inside the locker room and guests that are some of the greatest football minds from around the region. We hope you enjoyed the show. We know we had a blast. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on social media at JAKIB Sports. See you next time on Birds 365.